Very unusual lesson for you tonight. I've got some show and tell, as well as some things to show you on screen. So I'm going to move some of this out of the way. My good friend Chip Huber's here with us tonight. He came in, he's sitting on the back, and he invited me to come up and speak to some of the young people from their church. He lives near Murfreesboro. And so I went up last night, and I was trying to think of what I could show some young people and talk to them about the Bible and God. And I had this idea, and I told him last night, if this goes okay here, I might just do this tomorrow night. He said, if you do that tomorrow night, I'm going to come. So he's here, and that's great. So I appreciate our friendship. We go all the way back to about 3 or 4 years old, I think, when we worshiped together in Athens, and our paths have crossed various times over the years since then, and I'm thankful for his friendship and encouragement. So anyway, I want to share with you kind of a little bit of what I showed them with a little more in depth to it. And bear with me. I put my Bible here just so you don't think I forgot, because the illustration is going to take a few minutes, so be patient with me. We are going to get to some scriptures here in just a few minutes, but I want to show you something. So Nissan has a assembly plant in Smyrna, or somewhere up in that area, and they have an engine plant in Deckard, now over near Winchester. And the engine plant in Deckard has donated to us at Motlow a machine to use for our classes that they don't need anymore. And what this machine does is it takes pistons. This is a piston from a Nissan engine, I think a 4-cylinder Nissan engine. And these pistons are inside your car if you don't, unless you have one of those new electric ones. It's got these in it. But for the piston to work right and to not smoke crazy and all that, it needs rings around it. So it's got these little grooves, and these rings have to be snapped on inside those grooves like so. That ring snaps into position, and it's actually got about 4 or 5 rings to make it work right. And then the piston is kind of a pain to do. But then the piston slides up and down. There we go. That snaps in there, and it goes like that inside your engine. So they could just pay people to stand there all day putting rings on pistons, but instead, some pretty sharp folks have come up with a machine that puts the rings on the pistons. The machine was way too big to bring. But what I did do is bring some pistons and I'm going to tell you a little bit about how it works. So the pistons come in a tray, and they're delivered to, if there's a machine, and the machine has a conveyor belt that runs around in a loop. I've got a little video I'll show you in just a second. On that conveyor belt are these little, we call them pallets. I don't know if they have a better name, but these little trays are sitting on the conveyor belt, and they come out to a spot where the operator stands, and they come and they stack up here, and there'll be empty ones like that. Then the operator takes the pistons out of the tray, puts them on the pallets. After he loads 4 of them on there, you push a button, and away they go. They go around through the machine, and as it goes, it does its thing, and it puts these rings on there. It's really cool. Then when they come out, they come back to the same spot. The conveyor belt just goes in a big loop. They come out, they've got the rings on them. He takes them off of the thing, and you stack them in the empty box. So you slowly unload one box and load the other with rings, and then when this gets full, somebody takes it away, and they go to be put into an engine somewhere, and they just keep feeding him all day, and they keep feeding the machine, right? That's kind of how those things work. Well, so we've used it for various teaching purposes at school, because that's the kind of stuff that we teach our guys to maintain and work on. And we have to do a project every year. So we have to think of things to do. And I thought this year what I'd like for you to do, this is why I challenged my students last semester, was to replace the operator with a robot. So instead of a person loading and unloading the pistons, have a robot doing that. And this is a pretty realistic exercise. They do this kind of thing in practice quite often for various reasons. So here's the challenge. Well, there was several challenges to doing that. One of them is that the pistons, as they arrive, as you can see, they come like this in a box. And they're sitting in there oriented like that, because the box has these little places that hold them just right. But to be put onto the pallets, they have to be put on the pallets like this, okay? Sounds like no big deal, right? That's pretty simple for someone to do. But the type of machine, the type of robot that we have, this is a little bitty one. But we used a much bigger one. Again, too big to bring here. But the way that it works is it can turn and it can go up and down, and it has this little pincher on it, like a crab's claw. And if you can imagine, the challenge is you go down with the robot and you pick this up like that, and now the robot's got it. That's no problem. We can do that pretty easy. But here's the tray sitting there waiting, and the robot's got the piston in its gripper, and it needs to put it on there, but it needs to put it on there the other way around. So I knew right away this was going to be a challenge, and I didn't know how they would solve it. Like, how are they going to come up with a way? It picks it up like that, but it needs to turn it over. The robot arm can rotate around every kind of way imaginable, but no matter how you rotate it, if you rotate upside down, you're kind of, you need to turn this over like that is what needs to happen. And I didn't know how they would solve it. I was curious to see what kind of solution the students would come up with. So when I was at Chip's house, they had, it was more of a discussion, obviously. So I challenged the young people there to, what kind of ideas have you got about how you might solve it? They immediately started spitting out some ideas. Oh, you could do this, you could do that. Because human beings are problem solvers by nature, and we like that kind of creative problem solving stuff. And it's cool to see what young people come up with. So Sam's going to switch over. I'll show you a video of how the students solved this, and then we'll come back. Yeah, this is the robot in the room in our lab. Go ahead and push play. Here's the, oops. Yeah. Here's the pistons that need rings. This is the machine. Now, it's going to be, but I'm going to move the camera around in a second so you can see how it works. I'll give you a different angle on it here in just a second. I'm going to walk around. So it's loading. There's one. So what they came up with was they found a bolt, basically. This is a bolt that we mounted and ground off the point like a pencil, like sharpened it. And so it sets it down on there like that, and then it goes around to the other side and picks it up. That way it can turn it over. You see what it's doing? So it puts it down there. It's going to do another one. And after it gets all three of these, sometimes you wonder if it's going to catch it just right, but it does, thankfully. Because it would be ugly if it didn't. Then it releases those three. Now these three are three that already have rings on them that are waiting to be put away. So when they come, it's got to pick these up, and it's got to do the reverse to put them into the box where the pistons go that have rings. So again, it puts them on the little thing, and just does this kind of in reverse order of the first go round. And then it can set them over there in the box. And on it goes. Now, kind of neat, right? Kind of cool. A simple solution to a problem. And this robot looks pretty simple. I tell the kids because, ooh, see it almost. A lot of times young people think of robots, they think of these battle bots that do all kinds of crazy cool stuff and run around, but this is more just an arm. And in some ways it's kind of boring in some ways, but it's also kind of cool in some ways. The real cool thing is this box back here behind it is filled with computer equipment. And what it's doing is running the robot. Everybody looks at the arm because it's the part that moves around, but the more you learn about them, the more impressed you are with what's going on in that box, because what's going on in the box is some incredibly complicated programming. You get to see one of my students here, the video comes here. That's Chance. And he's pleased with it because he did that programming. Okay, Sam, go back to the PowerPoint, please. Now, a thing about that, here's some challenges to this thing. All you'd have to do to make that go really badly would be to move one of the boxes about like that, because it has to be exactly in the right place. They have some sensors to make sure it's in the right place, but if it's off a little bit, the robot would come down and break something because it would just crash right into the piston because it's blind. Also, if you were to put it there and you didn't have a piston in there, it would go through the motions thinking it was doing its job because this particular robot doesn't have a sensor on the gripper to tell it whether it's holding anything or not. Now, you can get more fancy stuff. We have some robots that have cameras on them to give them kind of vision. And what it could do is it could take a picture. It could go over here and take a picture and make sure. We just didn't have time to do all that. And we have robots that have sensors in the gripper that can tell if it's holding something. So you can do that. One of the most sophisticated things that they've got now that I've never messed with, but somebody was telling me about, is you could have a box with parts just kind of jumbled up like this, just any old way, a loose bin of parts, and they have a thing that'll come over it and it has a sensor. It goes this way once, and then it goes that way, and it takes a scan, and it builds an image inside, and then it uses artificial intelligence to program, and it can go down and just start picking stuff up because it maps out where everything is. It doesn't have to be precisely located. That's the like cutting edge of technology. Now you've got a whole lot of cool stuff going on there, right? Now, I haven't forgot about the Bible. We're going to get there. Hang with me. Impressive. Think about this. Could a 4-year-old pick up pistons out of here and put them on that tray? How long would it take me to show them how? 5 minutes? Could they? Do you feel like, having watched that robot do its job, that you could load them on there faster than the robot? You see how long it took it to put 3 parts on there and take 3 parts off? I guarantee you a 4-year-old could load that a lot faster and unload it a lot faster. And you could be trained like that. And the reason is because you and your arm are far away better than the robotic arm. Now, it's easy to get kind of impressed with the robotic arm and what all it does and be kind of like, ooh, wow, it's cool, you know. But it's something that a child could do, really. You have eyes. You have 2 eyes. Not only, I mean, like the dumber versions of our vision that we have is it takes a snapshot. So what you have to do is you move it over, you trigger it, it takes a picture, and then it looks to see what's in the picture. That's still pretty cool. But the even better ones are like video. They're like live pictures, which we don't have that. But guess what you have? It's real time. Then the dumb cameras take a 2D picture, but they can't tell depth. You upgrade to like a nicer camera, and it can actually perceive depth. That's a fancier camera. Guess what you got built in? Ours, I think, are all black and white cameras. They make some fancy, sophisticated ones that can tell color. Again, what do you come with? The optics that you're born with blow away any kind of instrumentation type of optics. The complexity of the robotic arm, this thing is called, it's got 6 degrees of freedom, which means that it can move in 6 different ways. There's 6 joints. Each joint has to be controlled, or else you wouldn't be able to do anything with it. So for each joint to be controlled, there has to be, the program that's running it has to be simultaneously coordinating the motion of 6 motors, which is complicated, right? Except you do the same thing. But if you start counting up the ways your arm and hand work, in the human hand alone, now you know this thing has open, close, that's all it does. Doop, 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 doop. So either 2 motors or 1 that's reversible is all you need, because it just goes. Zoop, zoop, zoop. You've got, it depends on how you count them, 27 ways your fingers can move. So, like 1, 2, 3, and just start counting if you want to. You can play around with it. But you can actually do some cool stuff like that. So your hand is orders of magnitude more complicated than this entire thing. And for you to do what you do, whatever it is, whether it's holding a spoon, this is why little children take so long to learn how to even just like pick up a spoon and use it. It's actually really complicated. The motions and the coordination that it takes, your brain is controlling untold number of muscles all at the same time, coordinating their movement to be able to grasp something and to move it through motions and then to move it around like that. A simple thing like putting a spoonful of cereal in your mouth takes a lot of coordination, but think of how much more fancy stuff than that you can do with you ever watch kids playing video games and their fingers are just flying? You know what I mean? It's amazing. Or adults playing video games too, for that matter. It's really cool, right? So the things that you can do are, again, it's easy to be impressed with this little thing or with that big thing, but your body is way more impressive. But here's the sad thing. Even though practically everybody, if you were to show them, would be impressed with this, there's people that don't make the connection that this had to be designed by somebody. If that's cool, if that's obviously complicated, who designed this? Well, I mean, we know the answer, but how in the world at large, in growing numbers, can come to the conclusion that you just kind of popped into the existence through random chance over a long period of time? Like if you found this laying around out, if I left this out in the parking lot, you wouldn't think that it just, came out of the ground like that. Like it just happened to be, maybe the wind blew some rocks and this is just some, you would know immediately somebody made this. This belongs to somebody made it. It's designed by somebody, it has a purpose. How much more your own body makes the same kinds of arguments. We are very complicated. David puts it this way. You formed my inward parts. You knitted me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well. And listen, we know, I would assume, I shouldn't say that. I imagine we know a lot more about the way the human body works than David did in terms of the structure and the inside of it and what's going on, the complexities of it all. He could probably appreciate maybe more than we do what the human body is capable of because he could do some awesome stuff. But he recognized that is a credit to the Creator, that we are a testimony to an awesome designer who made us. And it's cool when you go back to the beginning. Ooh, I thought I had, let's see if Genesis is coming up. I missed it. Okay, go to Genesis chapter 2. Genesis chapter 2. I missed a couple of verses on my slide here. We're going to come back to the 2 Chronicles passage in just a second. I want to think through some things about how we are designed and about our arms and hands and what we do and how this has in some ways led us astray over the years. Genesis 2 verse 7, the Lord formed the man out of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. Man became a living creature. Down in verse 15 it says, the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and keep it. Now that's very interesting. God put a human being in his creation and said, this is yours to work and keep. So he gave him authority to use his environment and manipulate the environment and do things with his environment. And in a way, that's what we've been doing ever since. It started with, you've got this garden and you can do stuff with it. You could maybe trim and plant and dig and whatever. He was given authority to use what he could find and work with it. And really, that's how, even like making a robot is simply finding materials that God placed here on earth, digging them up, putting them together, figuring out how they work, melting this one down, putting it together with that one, machining it. Over the years, we've learned how to do some pretty cool stuff. And God placed in people the ability to do that. Look at chapter 4 of Genesis. Do you remember this, that in the descendants of Cain, some of them had some special talents. In verse 20 of chapter 4, Ada bore Jabal. He was the father of those who dwell in tents and have livestock. His brother's name was Jubal. He was the father of all who play the lyre and pipe. Zillah also bore Tubal-Cain. He was the forger of all instruments of bronze and iron. We're in chapter 4 of Genesis. And people are taking bronze and iron and forging them and building stuff. We might think that's like relatively new, the Industrial Revolution. No, it goes back to chapter 4 of Genesis. They started working with the materials they could find to make things and build things and make instruments. Pointing out Chip again. He was an excellent trumpet player. I played sax. He played trumpet. His kids play trumpet now. But, they were making musical instruments in Genesis chapter 4. That's pretty cool, too. Hey, look, if I do this, I can toot on it and make a sound. And, now what else can we do? So you have people who are making instruments, stringed instruments. You have people who are working with metals to make and build tools. And this is where this comes from. In 2 Chronicles, I pointed this out before when we were studying through the Kings. You had in Jerusalem people, this is during Uzziah, the king. They made machines invented by skillful men to be on towers and corners to shoot arrows and great stones. How cool is that? In Uzziah's day, they had a machine that could throw a stone or a machine that could shoot an arrow. Again, we think we're doing some neat stuff, but human beings have been doing neat things ever since God made us because he gave us that ability to take and build things. When used in their most, at their highest level, we glorify God with these skills that he gave us. One way that was done was back when the tabernacle was being built. Notice what Moses said. Moses said to the people, "See, the Lord has called Bezalel, the son of Uri, son of Hur, the child of Judah. He's filled him with the Spirit of God with skill, intelligence, knowledge, and craftsmanship to devise artistic designs, to work in gold and silver and bronze, cutting stones for setting, carving wood, work in every skilled craft." So you have human beings, and God gave us, and some people more than others, a natural talent for working with things and building things skillfully, using intelligence, using thought and planning and problem solving and creativity to build things. At their highest level, those things point to our Creator and glorify him. But I want to point out that at their core, these things we point to the presence of a Creator, and that's been evident ever since the beginning. Ignore this idiot thing until we get to the end of this paragraph. All right? Foolish, stupid thing. This is how dumb people are. Romans 1 says, "What can be known about God is plain to them because God has shown it to them. His invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, being clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made. So they are without excuse. For although they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him, but they became futile in their thinking. Their foolish hearts became darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man and birds and animals and creeping things." Here's where the wheels ran off, and it happened surprisingly fast. People started using their creativity and their ability to build, and they started making stuff. And then instead of worshiping the Creator who made them, they started worshiping the work of their own hands. They used their creativity and their artistry to make things that looked like animals and people. And this is obviously some kind of Buddha-looking thing. They made this kind of garbage and bow down to it. This is how dumb we are. We're like simultaneously impressively smart and stupid at the same time. The human race, human beings, right? Because gave us this problem-solving creativity ability, but we use it to eventually turn away from God and start worshiping what we have made with our own hands. Isaiah puts it this way. First, we'll go to Acts. Paul says in Athens, being God's offspring, we were made by God. We ought not think that the divine being is like stone and silver, gold, an image formed by the art and imagination of man. See, people get it all backwards. We are God's offspring. Look at you and me. We're super impressive creations. We shouldn't imagine that God is like something that we've carved out of stone or overlaid with gold, but that's what people started doing. Back to Isaiah's day. He's kind of making fun here of how dumb the idols are. And he points out how he said the ironsmith takes a cutting tool. He works it over the coals. He fashions it with hammers and works it with his strong arm. He becomes hungry and his strength fails. He drinks water or no water, and he's faint. The carpenter stretches a line, marks it out with a pencil, shapes it with planes, marks it with a compass, shapes it into the figure of a man with the beauty of man to dwell in a house. Now, what he's talking about here is that they were making these idols. You know, you go back, it's amazing. I always marvel at how these ancient peoples, whether it be in Egypt or Greece, they carved these really intricate, I would say beautiful representations of people, you know, out of stone. And he's describing some of that process, but they made these things and then they bowed down to them and worshiped them. He says just a few verses later, he cuts down cedars. He chooses a cypress tree or oak tree, lets it go strong among the trees of the forest. He plants a cedar and the rain nourishes it. Then it becomes fuel for man. He takes part of it and warms himself and kindles a fire. He bakes some bread. He also makes a god and worships it. He makes an idol and falls down before it. The same guy cuts down one tree. Part of the tree is heating the house. Part of the tree is cooking the bread. And with another part of the tree, he's over there making a god. So when he finishes with it, he can set it up and then get down on his knees and pray to it. How dumb are we? How dumb are people to get it so backwards? They worship the work of their own hands, which is what he says in chapter 2. The land is filled with idols. They bow down to the work of their hands, to what their own fingers have made. Instead, what they should have been doing was recognizing God's handiwork. Notice it says they have lyre and harp, tambourine, flute, and wine to feast. They do not regard the deeds of the Lord or see the work of his hands. They have all these things that they have made, they think, with their own creativity, and they're suddenly become blind, like, I don't see any evidence of God. Can you believe that somebody would say, like, I look around, you show me, where is any evidence of God? I mean, look, where do you see any? I don't see any evidence of God. I don't see the work of his hands. It's literally everywhere. It's in me. It's in the environment. It's in the world around. It's in the plants. It's in everything. It shows us that this was all created by a creator. That's why Paul said it's been apparent from creation in the things that have been made. And yet people are like, I don't see it anywhere. But meanwhile, what they do see is the stuff that they've made with their own hands. Recently, there's been a lot of news. I'll give you one last example. We'll draw this to a close. You heard about this James Webb Space Telescope. Pretty cool. I think a big part of it is made in Huntsville, if not the whole thing. Really, really impressive. If you haven't seen it, you heard about the Hubble Space Telescope, right? This is a successor to the Hubble Space Telescope. And it floats around in space and takes amazingly detailed pictures of things. We won't go into all the details about it. I don't even know all the details about it. But to give you an idea how big it is, I don't know if you can tell, and this picture's kind of washed out, but there's a bunch of people standing here and a bunch of people standing there. That gives you a sense of how big this thing is once it's up there and unfolded. It's huge. I didn't really realize that looking at the diagram until you see this photo. It's like, wow, that thing's a lot bigger than I was kind of picturing like this, but it's enormous. And so they finally got it built, they got it launched, they got it to its place, they got it to open up, they pointed it at some spot in the sky, and they take pictures, they send them down, and it's images like this. It took this picture. And everybody's amazed by what people have accomplished. It is impressive, right? But what a lot of people sadly fail to realize is what it's looking at was made by an awesome creator. The pictures it's taking are of things that God has made. Psalms tells us, of old you laid the foundation of the earth, the heavens are the work of your hands. They will perish, but you will remain. They will all wear out like a garment. You will change them like a robe. They will pass away, but you are the same, and your years have no end. So we look at something like this, and while I'm talking, let me start cleaning up my mess here so we can wrap. We look at something like this that people have made, and we see the creativity and the intelligence and the design, the problem solving that human beings are capable of. And it's easy to be kind of impressed with the work of our own hands. It's easy to look at something and say, hey, wow, people did that. That's pretty cool. You can do that. Your students can do that. Your human beings can build a space telescope and send it out into space. We know how to make something like this. Aren't we clever? And we can, we can program it. That's really kind of neat. But fail to realize that not only on what the telescope is pointed at was made by our Creator. You think, how does this compare to that, by the way? He made all that, maybe more impressive. He made what's on the other end of the telescope that's looking out at it, right? I don't know which is more impressive, what the telescope's taking a picture of or the instrument that is taking that image in and processing it and thinking about it and imagining. And the fact that people could look at all of that on both ends of it and say, I don't see any God. You could only just do that if you just decide to suppress the truth and force your eyes closed to the evidence of that. Because how else can you explain where did it all come from? If you can tell this was made by somebody that knew what they were doing, this is nothing compared to you and me. And that's really, if you don't take anything else away from it, that's the main point I wanted to make tonight. Perhaps there's someone tonight who needs to give your life to the Lord.